The story begins with a pig's head, and someone explains that the genes determining the structure and form of a pig's tissues and organs are 95% similar to those of humans. Due to this genetic similarity between pigs and humans, these animals are used in practices that avoid the dissection of humans, something that has been taboo since ancient times. At this point, a man appears holding a blood-stained knife. As the man walks, blood drips on the floor, and he reflects that in the end, no matter how much a person boasts or stands out, fate is inevitable. The protagonist turns, as someone is calling for him. A man's feet appear, and he asks the protagonist if he understands what he's saying, because no matter how much a person stands out or is proud, in the end, 95% of it is just living the life of a pig. Then he praises him, saying that Maru has surpassed even those with 4 or 5 years of experience in using knives. However, annoyed, he asks if the protagonist is now also eyeing his position. The man calls the protagonist a bastard and strikes towards him, but hits the pig behind him instead. He looks at Maru and tells him to take a look. At this, the man excitedly says that Maru is still far from breaking his record. He continues hammering with the axe, while Maru, unfazed, begins to prepare his knife and calmly responds that he's going to break the counter again, calling him boss. The boy tells his boss to put his clothes on and stop with this already. The boss smiles while holding a large piece of meat, clearly proud of his work. He exclaims that this is his masterpiece and it's too good to sell. At this moment, his identification appears as Manager Hong Jun-ho. While cutting the pig, Maru calmly responds that he already knows he's the best, being indifferent to him. His identification is also shown, and he's an employee named Ham Maru. At this moment, the protagonist presses the knife against the pig and soon slices it, as Junho approaches and comments that it's quality work. He continues to praise Maru, saying he's very good for someone who's been handling a knife for just a year. Despite the praise, Maru seems irritated and warns that if Junho isn't going to help, he shouldn't get in the way. Hong then calls Kim Yang, telling her to inform them that Maru's delay is piling up today. And in a playful tone, he asks if she's taking Maru to field work. Kim Yang appears eating, and Hong shouts her name again, making the girl tremble. She looks back, confused, wondering, field work? To which Hong tells her to stop eating so much and that he's going to the sauna, so she should take care of the office. Kim Yang waves her hand and replies for him to have a good trip, and asks him to bring something tasty on the way back. In the next scene, Hong hugs Maru and says he knows how much Maru cares about him, making the protagonist uncomfortable. Maru, irritated, thinks to himself that he doesn't care and starts listing his frustrations, saying that Hong barely pays him, offers no decent benefits, makes him work overtime when he doesn't want to, and still drags him around after hours. To make it worse, he has the nerve to call this a butcher shop, but forces him to do the slaughtering too. Hong makes a strange face and comments that all of this is his love for him. Maru, out of patience, simply responds that he doesn't need any of it. In a memory, Hong recalls Maru's first day at work, where he gave him the challenge of slaughtering a pig as a test. We see Maru standing with a cold expression, holding a knife, looking at the pig. The protagonist is challenged by the boss, who says that if he kills it, he will pay him. The pig looks at the boy with bright, innocent eyes, and it is said that most people would hesitate at the thought of killing it. But shortly after, Maru is shown holding the pig's bloody head in his hands, while Hong concludes that he didn't even blink. Hong holds a bucket of water and comments that from that moment on, he knew. Then, the man pours a bucket of water over his head while saying that the boy was born to be a butcher. Maru, on the other hand, is visibly irritated, frowning and angrily muttering that whether butcher or whatever, he shouldn't be dragged into this situation during work hours. Then, we see a view of Hong from behind as Maru asks if the boss wants him to scrub his back. Sitting on small wooden stools in the bath, Hong comments that he heard the boy used to beat up all the kids at school, and that he should use that strength to scrub too. Maru, still impatient, asks if he's going to time it and pay him by the hour, to which Hong responds that for this, he won't be paid. Hong asks if Maru needs a lot of money, and while scrubbing his back, Maru admits that he does. Hong then offers an opportunity, saying that he has a job that will make him money this time. After hearing the offer, Maru agrees, saying he'll do it, and asks what kind of job it is. The boss then asks if he studied in Japan, and the protagonist, surprised, replies that he did, asking what that has to do with anything. Hong smiles and says that's enough, telling him to get ready to leave, as he's going to Japan. Some time passes, and we see the protagonist with his suitcase in a place. He looks ahead, surprised, and shouts, "What the hell is this?" in shock. Since then, 6 months have passed. A butcher shop is shown, and Maru reflects on the situation where he was sent to a Japanese livestock company that urgently needed a meat supply. That's the reason he was sent there. In the next scene, we see Maru, visibly frustrated, cutting meat forcefully and mumbling that he hasn't had a single day off in 6 months. He continues complaining, saying that if he worked like this in Korea, he'd make the same money. He doesn't know why the hell he's doing this in another country. He looks to the side, sweating, and reflects on this workplace in his thoughts. Maru thinks that even if they say there's a supply shortage, he's the only butcher here. And to make things worse, that Yakuza guy has been smoking cigarettes for 6 months, just watching him. In an attempt to ease the tension, Maru tries speaking in Japanese to the man, telling him that he can't smoke here. The man, with a smile, says he understands. Maru looks at a pot full of bones with suspicion and concludes that this is the most suspicious thing here. These people only want the ribs separated correctly and all the other parts discarded. He picks up one of the ribs in his hand and notices that they feel strangely heavier than usual. Upon closer examination, he realizes there's something inside. Maru, with his experience as a butcher, can see a fine line in the meat and recognizes that it's been cut and reassembled. He notices that some kind of white powder is leaking from the gap. The protagonist thinks this is a task no Japanese butcher could handle, which is why the Yakuza are keeping an eye on him, watching him constantly. He continues examining the meat and notices that there's no concern for hygiene, with ribs already cut and glued back together. While holding the rib, he looks back and notices the white powder. He decides to focus on the job and not dwell on it too much, as he'll be leaving soon anyway. Meanwhile, the man keeps watching him. The Yakuza looks at it confused, and the boy wonders if he should just leave now. Finally, a call from the livestock products company office in South Korea is shown, and Hong asks if he wants to return already. The protagonist, frustrated, yells into the phone, ranting about 6 months of overtime, night shifts, and being watched by a Yakuza member. He asks if this seems normal to his boss. On the other end of the line, the boss responds angrily, asking if the protagonist thinks all of this is a joke. He comments that Maru was doing fine with the overtime and night shifts, questioning why he's starting to complain now. The boy, still on the phone, tries to argue that it's not something sudden, but that something is seriously wrong here. The boss, in an accusatory tone, reminds him that he needed the money and was given this opportunity. He asks if the protagonist is giving up now, mentioning his brother's college tuition and his mother's credit card debts. As the boss keeps pressuring him, he asks if the protagonist really thought making money was a joke. The protagonist, visibly irritated, gives in, agreeing to stay for another month while the boss promises to take care of things by then. Maru responds with, "Yes, sir," but his face shows how frustrated he is, clenching his teeth. He slams the phone down in the public booth, muttering that all of this is because of money. Finally, he returns to work angrily, stabbing the meat once again. He keeps stabbing the meat and thinks to himself that if it weren't for the money, he would have quit a long time ago. However, he decides to keep going and convinces himself to endure it for another month. Suddenly, he hears someone call him Maru-chan in Japanese. He stops what he's doing and looks back, confused. It's the Yakuza member, who approaches him half-naked and acting strangely, asking if the work is going well. The Yakuza man comes closer and places his hands uncomfortably on Maru. He sarcastically thanks the boy for his hard work, saying that without him, they'd be in serious trouble. Maru angrily thinks that the man just touched his face with the same hand he was scratching other parts of his body with, used him for something else. At that moment, Maru notices something suspicious. The man is armed. However, the Yakuza man seems oblivious to Maru's anger and keeps talking as if nothing is wrong. He casually mentions that it's his girlfriend's birthday, so he'll be leaving work early. Before going, he says the gang's newest member will replace him. At that moment, someone enters the room. Maru looks at the feet of the newcomer. The boss introduces him as the newest, an immense and intimidating figure. Upon seeing the new replacement, Maru is shocked to discover that this huge man is the same age as him, 23 years old. The bald man introduces Maru-chan, while asking him to take the prepared ribs and place them in the right spot. The muscular man helping warns that those ribs are their livelihood. Obediently, Maru responds that he understands the boss's request. Confused, the muscular man asks where exactly there is, but the bald man, irritated, shouts that there is there, demanding that he put the ribs somewhere. Even more confused, the muscular man keeps asking if there is to the east or west, but the bald man, losing his patience, orders him to just use his head and put them anywhere. Maru watches the situation with confusion and surprise. Suddenly, a metal hook begins to sway and fall. Maru's eyes widen, shocked by what's happening. The situation seems to worsen quickly, as if an earthquake is starting. He crouches down and loudly asks if this is an earthquake. The bald man, distressed, orders everyone to keep the ribs from falling, and the muscular man responds that he understands and runs to try to catch them. In the middle of the confusion, the muscular man trips, shouting, "Oh no!" as he desperately tries to prevent the ribs from falling. However, he fails, and a pile of ribs crashes to the ground, causing dust to scatter. As the dust swirls in the air, the protagonist covers his nose with his hand and comments, surprised, that this is white powder. The bald man approaches with a strange smile, playfully asking if this is Maru's first time dealing with an earthquake. Immediately after, the bald man explains that there's a lot of bone dust flying in the air, but asks Maru-chan not to worry about it. He tells him to leave that to them and continue working. The protagonist, still uncomfortable, covers his face with his hand, trying to protect himself from the dust in the air, without saying a word. The boss then gets angry with his subordinate, calling him a slow idiot and ordering him to pick something up from the floor. The large man quickly obeys, responding with a firm, "Understood, boss," as he bends down to follow the order. Still hesitant, the man, holding the ribs, questions the boss about Maru being from Korea, as had been mentioned. He seems concerned about it. The boss, impatient, responds curtly, without paying much attention to his subordinate's concern. The latter then comments that if Maru is Korean, he probably doesn't know they're dealing with drugs and, on top of that, wouldn't understand what they're saying in Japanese. Maru, with his back to the two, abruptly interrupts them, ordering in Japanese for them to be quiet. He looks back, sweating, while the bald man murmurs irritably, calling Maru an idiot in Japanese. When the protagonist turns to face them, one of the men notices and exclaims in surprise that he understands Japanese. At that moment, the bald man calls him and points a gun directly at him. Maru freezes as the bald man, with a threatening look, says, "Sorry." Maru, in shock, wonders if his life is really going to end like this. He begins to reflect on his harsh reality, how much he has worked tirelessly, slaughtering pigs every day to try to survive and support his family. Now he finds himself in this situation, about to die in a completely senseless way. With the finger on the trigger, Maru looks intently at the gun and thinks, desperately, that here, in this place, he doesn't want to die. At that moment, a memory echoes in his mind. He remembers the first time he entered that organization, when he was given the test to slaughter a pig. The boss, now talking about Maru, reflected on his behavior in the past. He said that most people would hesitate if he ordered them to kill a pig, but not Maru. Maru held the pig's head without any hesitation, which surprised the boss. He recalled that usually after killing their first animal, people are shaken, but instead, Maru simply asked how he could kill the pig efficiently, with a single strike. His intent from the start was clear, to get the job done as quickly and directly as possible. Hong stands in front of the protagonist and soon smiles, for he knew at that moment that Maru was on his side, regardless of whether it was a pig or a human. Maru was considered a true butcher, born for this task. Then the scene returns to the action, with Maru striking the bald Yakuza's arm. The man screams in pain after losing his arm. Maru reaffirms who he really is, being a butcher. That is his nature and his destiny, and he has finally accepted it completely. The Yakuza screams in pain and anger, clutching his arm. Immediately afterward, the young man reflects on his slaughtering experience. He remembers having killed countless pigs, which share 95% similarity with humans. The young man continues reflecting and realizes that by knowing so much about pigs, he also knows where to cut a human being. He thinks about where to stab to ensure a person dies quickly. The protagonist grips the knife with a threatening look and stabs the man in front of him with force. The young man clenches his teeth, and the man screams in pain as Maru continues his ruthless action, thinking about how he has always been a butcher, someone who processes meat without hesitation. Until that moment, he had dealt with countless pigs, and now he applies that same coldness to his human opponent. Maru wonders if the death he is causing now is that of a pig or a person. Soon after, the Yakuza falls to the ground, defeated, and the protagonist thinks it must be a person, concluding his earlier thought. At that moment, the large man from earlier begins to run, and Maru looks back in shock. The man shouts, calling him a bastard, and soon grabs him, slamming him against a wall. In the process, the pork cuts begin to sway, almost falling to the ground. Then, the man started punching Maru's face hard while shouting how dare he touch his brother. The big man shouted that his late brother was a kind person and had planned to propose to his girlfriend that very day. The guy raised his fist to deliver his final blow, but the young man, realizing the danger, landed a precise strike on the man's stomach, which had no effect, leaving the protagonist surprised. Irritated, the man continued beating Maru while asking if he really thought a simple knife stab would stop him. Despite the growing pain, the protagonist wondered what kind of monster he was facing, as the man withstood a point-blank stab. At that moment, the man grabbed his neck, calling him a bastard and stating that he would tear his throat out. Maru couldn't breathe, and voices began calling his name. Hong appeared, cutting open a pig's body, and with a sinister smile, looked at the young man and said in a provocative tone that pigs have strong bones and a lot of fat. He warned him, saying that if he wasn't careful, he could end up damaging his knife. He explained that if the young man was truly a butcher, he needed to learn to cut around the bones while slicing the fat. To do this, he had to memorize the ideal path. He seems to try to reassure the young man, saying that he shouldn't worry so much because he believes that he would instinctively see the path. The perspective reveals the young man in combat, clearly seeing the path on his opponent's body, almost as if he were replicating the cut on the pig. The young man then, without hesitation, drives his knife with precision into the side of the big man's body. Maru starts pressing harder and lets out a shout, giving it his all, finally managing to cut the man. Hong's voice echoes in the protagonist's mind, saying that he told him before, no matter what anyone says, he's a natural butcher. The man falls on top of Maru, and Maru quickly pushes him off, saying the big man is heavier than a pig. Suddenly, Maru puts his hand to his mouth and starts hearing noise. In shock, he thinks that this was all self-defense. The young man keeps reflecting on what he did, believing that if he hadn't killed, he would have been the one to die. He starts to wonder if the police would believe his version, but concludes that no matter what he says, it will all sound like an excuse. Then, his thoughts shift to the Yakuza, considering what might happen if they find out what he did. The protagonist's eyes widen, realizing the only possible way out is to set everything on fire. Suddenly, an angry man appears upstairs, pointing at him and calling him a bastard. The young man looks up, desperate, wondering if there was another one. Annoyed, the man starts shooting, saying he's a low-level dispatch worker, and how dare he kill his henchman. While the young man runs desperately to escape, the bandit shouts angrily, stating that he will hunt him down and kill him. At that moment, Maru finds a door leading to the freezer and runs toward it. The pursuer keeps firing, calling him a coward and saying he ran there only to end up in a dead end. He enters the freezer, calling the boy a coward, and soon stops shooting. He looks ahead, confused, unsure of where Maru is. Frustrated, the bandit decides to taunt him, asking how long he thinks he can keep hiding, offering a cruel option, saying that if the young man kneels and begs, he'll end his suffering. The man pauses for a moment and sees the protagonist's legs. He comments that the situation is interesting, saying to himself that the boy is hiding so well that he can't find him. Irritated, he loses his patience, unloading his weapon while saying he can't find him. The bullets hit the shoe, sending debris flying everywhere. At that moment, the protagonist says he's right here and pushes a piece of pork, causing the other pieces to crash down on the man, crushing him. The Yakuza yells, calling him a brat, as blood spills from his mouth. Wasting no time, Maru charges at the Yakuza, saying he's going to finish him off, while the man can't believe this is happening. But it was too late as Maru struck him, shouting that every time he speaks the man calls him a pig or a brat, but now he's finally going to shut him up. The Yakuza, still with a smile, warns that if the boy was going to stab him, he should have aimed for the neck. He then pulls out a gun and begins to say he's going to finish the boy. But something happens, and his fingers start trembling, and nervously he exclaims that he can't move. A flashback of Hong appears, with him explaining about the brachial plexus, referring to it as a bundle of nerves that connects the pig's spinal cord to its front legs. He points to the corresponding region on his own body and comments that both humans and pigs share the same anatomy, indicating that if someone is stabbed in that area, whether human or pig, they will be immobilized. Hong asks if Maru is starting to realize that humans and pigs are 95% alike. He seems to enjoy manipulating the young man's mind, insinuating that soon he won't be able to distinguish between humans and pigs. The scene returns to the confrontation, and Maru is on top of the man, delivering multiple blows, while the Yakuza tells him to wait a moment. Some time passes, and Maru's plane finally lands in Korea. The protagonist is then climbing a staircase, grimacing with relief that he is finally back. The young man leans on his knees, panting, while reflecting that even after half a year, all of this is still exhausting. He thinks that maybe it would be better to move away completely from that cursed neighborhood. As a cat brushes against his leg, he remembers that he returned to Korea immediately on an early morning flight, relieved that he wasn't pursued by the Yakuza. In his mind, he recalls having set the place on fire, destroying all evidence and traces that could connect him to the incident, erasing everything about the place where the Yakuza had died. A house appears, and as he descends the stairs, he stands in front of a door, thinking that although it's still early morning, the lights in the house are on. He wonders if everyone is still awake as he approaches the door. He places his hand on the doorknob, and as he opens the door, he asks his mother why she's still awake at this hour, stating that he managed to earn quite a bit of money this time and even brought gifts from Japan. Suddenly, his expression changes as he sees the house in disarray. He wonders what happened and if there was a thief inside. Soon, he starts desperately calling for his mother and his brother, Naru. As he walks through the house, he steps on something on the floor and looks down, curious. He notices it's a bone and, picking it up, Maru wonders aloud why it's there. Shortly after, he hears a familiar voice saying they're glad he's back. He quickly turns around, and several Yakuza men appear. The young man, incredulous, can't believe they've already arrived at his house. The Yakuza leader looks directly at the boy and asks if his name is Maru. The protagonist becomes even more confused, wondering if his mother and brother are also involved with these dangerous men. The leader then says he has already been looking for his family, and Maru is making things easier for him as he begins to pull something from inside his jacket. Furious, Maru grabs the broken piece of bone and murmurs in his thoughts that he will finish off all these Yakuza. Suddenly, the man in front of him shows a police badge, revealing that he's a detective. His name is Han Tai-sik from the Drug Crime Investigation Division. Maru is stunned at the sight of the badge, unable to believe what he's hearing. Maru observes, confused, the police officers outside his house and thinks to himself that they're not even Yakuza, but the police. He begins to suspect something and tells himself that something is wrong. His mind flashes back to past events, recalling the brutal fights he had with the Yakuza, questioning if everything that is happening now is because of those incidents. Detective Han Tai-sik approaches Maru and says that he will explain the details later, but that he needs his cooperation for now. Maru, however, stares at the detective and asks if it's right for the police to break into someone's house like that, questioning what he could have done wrong. One of the men from the police group, noticing Maru's state, tries to calm him down, raising his hands and explaining that it was all a misunderstanding. He says that the mess wasn't caused by the police, but by Maru's own mother, who had been acting out of control. Maru, surprised, asks about his mother, and Han Tai-sik confirms it was her. The detective then tells him that his mother is involved with drugs, leaving the boy in shock. Maru looks at a family photo, reflecting on how immature his mother was. He then recalls a scene where his mother appears smiling, carrying shopping bags and telling him that she bought new clothes. Even when the family was going through financial difficulties, his mother kept spending money irresponsibly. Despite that, he still loved her deeply and cherished her immature smile. He can hardly believe that his mother was using drugs. The scene cuts to a hospital. His mother is in a bed, surrounded by doctors trying to control her as she has an overdose. They shout instructions, preparing a syringe to sedate her. Meanwhile, Maru watches this scene from a distance. Amid all this, he feels confused and remembers hearing that when the police found her, she was already in that critical state. He recalls the officer holding a bone in a plastic bag, explaining that this is how the substance had been distributed recently. The detective, holding a bag with a substance inside, asks Maru if he knows when his mother started using drugs. The protagonist responds that he's not sure. The man, looking intently at Maru, questions whether he really doesn't know anything about it, to which the protagonist replies with a hesitant yes. The man remains silent for a moment. Then he says he understands and hands a card to the protagonist, recommending that he get in touch if he remembers anything. Maru turns his back, looking down in distress while the man walks away with his colleagues. Already in the parking lot, the detective starts smoking in the car, suffocating his colleague, who asks him to open the window as the smoke smell is unbearable. The detective tells him to shut up, claiming that he can't concentrate with so much noise. The man angrily yells at Detective Han Tai-sik, saying he could have smoked outside, complaining that the place feels like a gas chamber during training. Han Tai-sik asks why he should have to go outside to smoke. Shortly after, the detective puts out his cigarette in a cup filled with cigarette butts, murmuring the protagonist's name. He places his hand on his forehead, deep in thought about Maru's case. The protagonist is now next to his mother and thinks that none of this makes sense, no matter how he analyzes the situation. Then, he starts thinking that only 6 hours have passed since he arrived home, and he took all the necessary precautions to leave no traces at the scene. He questions how the Yakuza could have moved faster than him without any information. At that moment, his phone starts ringing, and we see that the caller is Hong. Maru answers, and on the other end of the line, Hong sounds alarmed, asking about the fire at the Japanese establishment and if Maru is okay. Maru replies that he's fine, but that he has work to do and will call later. Laughing, Hong asks what kind of work Maru has to do, To which Maru responds that he can't talk now, as he has other things on his mind. When Hong asks why and if his mother used drugs, the protagonist reacts confused, asking what he's talking about. At this, Hong begins to laugh out loud, and Maru nervously asks what he just said. The scene then shifts to Hong being pampered by his subordinates. One of the men comments on how Hong's skin looks like that of a 10-year-old, while another adjusts a fan, asking if the breeze is good enough for him. Relaxed, Hong asks if Maru received the bone marrow well. Meanwhile, one of Hong's assistants seems almost ecstatic, saying he can't believe he touched the manager's feet and that he won't wash his hands for the rest of his life. A hatchet appears, and Hong asks if the protagonist thought the Yakuza did this. On the other end of the line, a furious Maru asks what the hell he did wrong. Hong, still with his sadistic smile, replies that Maru did nothing wrong. He mentions that Maru is an SSS-class butcher, and because of that, he will need to work with Hong for a long time. He then shows a luxurious box full of knives, saying he reserved a special place for Maru. Maru starts yelling in anger, saying that what Hong is saying is complete nonsense, and that he should see what he did to someone else's family. Meanwhile, Hong keeps taunting, mentioning that Maru's sister misses him, while a scene shows two women eating and discussing using the company's card to pay for their expenses. Hong suggests that Maru went to the company because of this, and then makes a comment about the need for Maru and his mother to support themselves, and that his mother needs rehabilitation. Hong asks if Maru needs a lot of money, and suggests that he could earn a large amount of money by cutting up many people. He mentions that with the skills Maru has, he could even buy a building in Gangnam, offering a car to help him start the job. He finishes by suggesting that Maru join him to catch some suckers before ending the call, smiling menacingly and saying they'll talk later. Maru, next to his mother in the hospital, looks at his phone thoughtfully and squeezes it, furious. Some time passes, and we see a man next to a truck with a pig figure. Someone yells at him not to just stand there and help because he's not there for sightseeing. The man, wearing glasses, responds that he's better suited for this, and the other guy curses at him, calling him rude. A bag falls to the ground, and the man inside the truck tells his colleague to pick it up, to which he does and calls him an idiot. Next, the face of a person appears inside the bag, and the hooded man asks with an irritated tone if the other person is really going to handle the meat that way, threatening to tell Manager Hong about what happened. The hooded man in the truck carries the bag on his back and grumbles, calling his colleague stingy, accusing him of not really helping and just talking nonsense. He then steps out of the truck and removes his mask, exclaiming that it's too hot and questioning why there are so many packages in the truck. His name is Baek Seoko, and he's a supervisor. The other supervisor is identified as Choi Do-il, who comments that after finishing the job, they should take the rookie along. Baek Seoko advanced toward Choi, visibly furious. He accused him of wanting him to carry the meat and also take the rookie, questioning if Choi saw him as a slave and if he had no conscience. Choi, keeping calm, responded sarcastically, saying that Seoko had been a slave since he joined the company, reminding him that he lost in rock, paper, scissors, provoking him even further. With a teasing smile, Choi suggested that perhaps Seoko was scared of the rookie and mentioned that someone like him would surely be afraid of Jung Hyung. Seoko became even more enraged, his expression growing darker as Choi continued to provoke him, and he repeated the word pig with an infuriated look. Consumed by anger, Seoko drew a hammer and charged toward Choi, asking who was being called a pig. Choi stepped forward with his knife, and the two clashed weapons. It was like a dragon against a tiger. Choi said that he had been calling him a pig since he joined the company and teased once again, threatening to cut his throat. Seoko, in turn, insulted him, suggesting that maybe it was time to serve him on a plate. The two continued to stare each other down, and Choi withdrew his weapon, calling Seoko an adorable bastard. He then mentioned that Seoko would probably cause an accident because of his simple-mindedness, warning that he was leaving and that Seoko could keep the truck, casually waving as he descended the stairs. The company truck is parked outside at night. Inside, Seoko is sleeping soundly. Suddenly, something falls on his face, and he wakes up startled. Looking to the side, he sees a cat sitting on the truck's hood, meowing at him. Still confused, Seoko gets up and looks at the cat as if trying to figure out why it's there, thinking that maybe the feline was there to replace Supervisor Choi. He then picks up the cat and suggests that it might have been attracted by the smell of meat nearby. The cat suddenly gets scared, and Seoko thinks about the absence of the supervisor, wondering why he's late. Seoko descends the stairs, reflecting on what Choi had mentioned about him causing an accident. Now irritated, he wonders if Choi went to dinner with the rookie without him. Seoko notices that the door is ajar and comments that it wasn't properly closed, insinuating that the group inside was having so much fun they didn't even notice. He enters the building, still holding the cat in his arms, and calls for Choi. His eyes widen as he steps into a hallway and sees the floor covered with bottles and broken objects scattered everywhere. Shocked, Syoko wonders what's going on. He keeps walking around the place and gets annoyed at the thought that Choi brought the rookie to some kind of party. As he approaches a figure on the ground, he calls the rookie and asks where Supervisor Choi is, warning that if things continue like this, even Manager Hong would get angry with them. He then looks down and sees Choi defeated and bleeding on the ground. Syoko lets out a laugh and murmurs that he can't believe this idiot. He grips a hammer tightly and mentions that the superiors were coming to greet him, but the rookie dared to point a bread knife at them. Syoko warns that if the rookie keeps up this attitude, he would soon be dead on the floor. We then see another person's feet, and while holding a knife, Maru asks if it's the superior. With a sinister look, he coldly asks if Syoko also belongs to world livestock. Syoko smiles nonchalantly and responds indifferently, as if prepared for what was coming. He continues to provoke, questioning where the other's manners were, mentioning that younger people had become very petty lately. He wonders if the other wasn't properly taught at home, while holding the hammer threateningly. Immediately after, Maru makes a swift move with his foot and advances with a knife, ready to strike. Syoko gives a smile and asks if he knows what they call a strong cow. Then, without waiting for a response, he attacks ferociously and breaks the protagonist's knife, leaving him surprised. Syoko, with a manic grin, moves to attack again and shouts for the rookie to keep his head in place. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to a festive setting, where there is a cake decorated with figures, presents around it, and various drinks. The room is full of balloons and decorations, with people in suits organizing everything. Someone at the event comments that it was an exaggeration to send Chief Bayek to fetch the rookie, while another person concerned questions if that wasn't too much, as they all know Chief Choi's temperament well. Another individual, sweating and clearly irritated, defends the decision, shouting that Director Hong had said the new recruit was the best. A furious man approaches the others, asking if they have a problem with Chief Choi going, or if the problem is with Chief Beck. Meanwhile, we see Hong sitting on top of a pile of men, and one of them discusses whether Chief Choi is stronger than Chief Beck. One of the men recalls that he's never seen Beck fight, but believes even Choi couldn't beat him. Others think Beck is just someone who makes strange puns, but he is quickly corrected. His puns are considered sacred. One of the men, named Junsik, from the World Livestock Production Group, claims to have seen Chief Bayek fight, and says the others have no idea how strong he really is. In a flashback, a brutal scene of Bayek strangling a man is shown. The man, amidst the pain, is being pressured to answer a question about what you call a cow on fire. This was the moment Bayek became a legend, defeating all the thugs and gangsters in the area. His brutality and strength are emphasized, and his feats are clearly revered, as he stood out in an environment full of violence and danger. Beck, after defeating his enemies, stands atop a pile of bodies, solidifying his position of power. He is called the Emperor who conquered the region. Even with bare hands, his strength was impressive, but what truly defined him was the hammer he received as a gift from Director Hong. It is said that, at that moment, the physically strongest man met the strongest weapon. Then, the man questions whether Maru understands what that means, and that Chief Bayek, wielding the hammer, is compared to a bull that cannot be stopped. Chief Bayek advances fiercely, throwing the protagonist backward, and, with a smile, taunts the rookie, mocking his skills and questioning whether with those same skills he had killed Supervisor Choi. While Maru is lying on the ground, the man attacks again, saying that a boy like Maru wouldn't be able to defeat Choi. As he holds the hammer, the guy sarcastically asks what one would call a cow that paints well. Then, he answers his own question with a shout, "Picasso!" as he attacks ferociously. Syoko attacks again with his fist, and the protagonist is thrown back once more. As he recovers, Maru comments that the man isn't just physically strong, but also ruthless. The man continues to taunt him, saying he was just trying to lighten the mood, and accuses the rookie of not knowing how to laugh at jokes. Maru, exhausted and filled with rage, thinks to himself that the more they fight, the faster his opponent seems to become. Syoko asks if he's going to keep attacking without responding to his words. Then, he swings the hammer again, threatening to test how long it would take the rookie to start laughing at his jokes. As the fight continues, the opponent keeps up his absurd provocations, asking nonsensical questions like, what kind of car does a cow drive? And how does a cow introduce itself? Meanwhile, the protagonist keeps dodging the giant's attacks until he hits the ground. Maru notices Syoko's neck and charges from behind, saying it's a blind spot. But his attack is interrupted when Syoko grabs his blade with his mouth. Holding the knife with his mouth, Syoko asks what you call a cow that bites a knife. With wide eyes, he says, checkpoint! He makes sure to remind Maru that even Chief Choi laughed at his joke, complaining that the young man is hard to please. He keeps laughing and taunts further, comparing the young man's fighting to a mere mosquito bite. He raises his hammer and declares that the attack has already been made. Soon he unleashes a flurry of strikes and Maru dodges all of them. One comes close, but the protagonist manages to avoid it again. He thinks this is bad and that the guy has gotten even faster. Suddenly, Syoko's attack is right in front of him, and Maru takes a hit to the chest. Syoko grabs his leg and makes yet another joke, referring to an ox from the sky. He throws Maru against the wall, and blood starts to drip from his nose. Without giving him time, Syoko slams him down again and, holding the hammer, asks why he still isn't laughing. Suddenly, Syoko looks up and sees blood trickling from his wrist. Syoko then asks if Maru had only aimed at his vital points. Chief Bayek calls Maru a punk and comments that the opponent only aimed at his vital points. He seems impressed and mentions that now he understands why Director Hong called him the best of the best. While Chief Bayek points a weapon at Maru, who is also wounded, sarcastically asks if people laugh at Chief Bayek's bad jokes. Furious, Bayek angrily responds, "What?" and prepares to attack him with a heavy weapon, indignantly shouting about how Maru dared to belittle his jokes. Maru prepares himself and stays alert for the man's next moves. Hong is at a party, wearing a birthday hat, holding a hammer, and excitedly exclaiming that the object is artistic. He slams the hammer down on a surface with force. Then, he turns around and admires a framed picture of Maru, commenting that he's very photogenic and could even be a celebrity. Meanwhile, two subordinates with simpler appearances seem nervous, bowing to Hong, thanking him for his work. Hong makes a comment about Chief Bayek, saying that he would be the best match for someone, but it's a shame that Bayek is obsessed with his own bad jokes. The subordinates eagerly agree, saying that among all the employees, no one can surpass Chief Bayek. Even if new recruits are extraordinary, Bayek is still the best. One of the subordinates adds that despite everything, they have great respect for Bayek. Finally, Hong's expression changes, becoming visibly more serious and somber, questioning why the two are referring to Maru informally, as if it were disrespectful. The two subordinates, scared and confused, wonder what they did wrong. Still serious, Hong asks if they shouldn't be using honorifics when talking about Manager Maru. The revelation shocks the subordinates, who can't believe that the new recruit, only 23 years old, could be a manager. Hong then reminds the subordinates that earlier they referred to Chief Bayek as an unstoppable bull. He makes a sarcastic remark, suggesting that although a bull is strong, it is still just a beast. Chief Bayek, visibly injured, is repeatedly hit with a hammer, emphasizing the brutality of the blows. Chief Bayek, gravely wounded, then collapses to his knees with the hammer lying on the ground before him. Chief Bayek looks at the ground, thoughtful, and acknowledges that no matter what a beast does, it is still just an animal. Maru, standing, looks down at him and asks if a beast can defeat a butcher. Chief Bayek, surprised, reflects on the new recruit, realizing that instead of attacking randomly, he was cutting the nerves in his body so that when he applied force, everything would explode at once. He admits to himself that he underestimated the recruit, thinking he was having fun, but realizes that he was being controlled the whole time, as if he was running in the palm of his hand. Then, Chief Bayek, still kneeling, calls Maru a rookie and tries to say something with a smile, but Maru, raising the hammer, asks coldly, "What do you call a cow that dies?" Confetti falls as Maru stands with his head down. Around him, several people congratulate him for joining them, shouting, "Manager Maru, congratulations on joining the team." Everyone seems extremely excited, praising him for being unique and recognized by Chief Hong. The crowd's enthusiasm is interrupted when Maru raises his bloody hand and throws something. The men, confused, ask what he threw and are shocked to see the object. They soon realize that he tossed 2 employee badges, both stained with blood, and Maru coldly mentions that he took down 2 more pigs. He then challenges the crowd, saying, "Catch me if you can." Maru is surrounded by a large number of men in suits, all ready to attack, with weapons in hand. 2 of them, holding knives, approach as Maru faces away from them, standing in front of a door. He turns around, with a cold expression and eyes glowing, provoking the men by asking if they aren't going to fight, calling them damn pigs. Chief Hong, watching from a distance while seated on a throne, comments that Maru is stronger than he expected. Maru then begins to fight brutally against the men surrounding him, slashing and attacking with great speed and force. He takes down several opponents, with blood splattering with each strike. As the fight continues, Chief Hong watches, impressed by Maru's brutality, wondering if he intends to take down all of his men. Hong remains seated on the throne as his furious subordinates advance with weapons drawn. Maru, in turn, uses a bloody sword and, with quick strikes, slashes the men attacking him, causing blood to spray everywhere. Chief Hong, observing the carnage, comments that things won't work out this way. He then decides that he will have to act, standing up from the throne, holding something firmly. In a moment of excitement, the red-haired chief shouts Hamaru's name repeatedly, urging him to continue. He orders Maru to exterminate them all, excited by the intensity of the battle. Chief Hong calls the subordinates pigs who, though usually passive, sometimes attack humans. With this, a large group of men furiously charge at Maru, armed with clubs and knives. The comparison continues, saying that the first step for a butcher is to bring down the pigs with a single blow. Maru, determined, grabs the hammer and uses it to brutally strike down his opponents. One of the men, enraged, shouts that Maru dares to use Chief Bayek's hammer and incites the others to decapitate Maru and offer his head as a sacrifice at Bayek's altar. As the confrontation continues, Maru remains relentless, and the narrative suggests that the second step for a butcher is to let the blood flow. The sequence of slaughter, where before dissecting a pig, it is necessary to drain the blood. Then, Maru stabs one of his enemies in the neck, simultaneously hitting both the carotid and jugular arteries. The man screams in pain, while others attack Maru with hammers and knives. Maru continues fighting, swiftly slashing at his enemies, while some scream in agony. The subordinates panic as they see Maru taking Chief O hostage, calling him a filthy terrorist. One of them, determined, shouts that he will save Chief O, charging at Maru. The narrator then mentions the third step in the slaughter, skinning, marking the true beginning of the dissection. Maru is performing a violent procedure, using a knife to tear the skin off a corpse. He describes the process as skinning the pig's hide, suggesting that the body might be linked to the slaughter of pigs, perhaps as a metaphor. Then, Maru, with a determined and rage-filled expression, wields the bloody knife and charges with impressive speed, attacking several men around him with quick and lethal strikes. Chief Hong watches the action, seeming to act as a mentor or instructor. He declares that the rest of the steps will be left for another time. Maru questions whether he is being trained or evaluated. The bodies attacked by Maru lay on the ground, dead and covered in blood. Exhausted but still holding the bloody knife, he breathes heavily, showing a mixture of fatigue and adrenaline. He observes the bodies around him, and his stiff posture and focused gaze suggest that he is becoming accustomed to or accepting the violence surrounding him. A group of men, who appear to be members of a gang or organization, witness the carnage. They are terrified by what they have seen, referring to Maru as a monster. They comment that this is the true power of someone at the manager level, showing that the man has earned a level of respect and fear among them. They express their fear and doubt about how they could defeat someone with such power. Maru wears an intimidating expression, holding his bloody knife. He approaches a group of enemies who are retreating, and one of them screams in panic, begging him not to come closer. Maru, with an intense look, responds that he had already warned Manu, one of his adversaries. In a quick and brutal move, he delivers a powerful blow with the knife, causing a loud crash. After the attack, he turns around, still panting, and hears someone say that there will come a time when even he will be confused. The person continues, saying that he won't know anymore whether the things he is killing are humans or pigs. Chief Hong seems to be taunting the protagonist about his brutality. Chief Hong, asking the protagonist what he thinks of the people he just killed, throws a question that seems to aim at messing with his mind. Did they look like pigs to you? The scene becomes even more insane and surreal. Hong talks about the deaths with a strawberry cake in the background, as if sarcastically celebrating the massacre. Chief Hong, laughing maniacally, claims that he always knew Maru would become just like him, a butcher. He continues to taunt, saying that the protagonist is of the same species as him. Then Hong decides that it's enough playing with the pigs and invites the protagonist to move forward, stating that he has prepared everything carefully. At this moment, Maru, still holding the bloody knife, urgently asks, "Where is my sister?" His expression reveals his determination to find answers. He stares at Hong and his henchmen, pointing the knife at them, while one of his steps crushes the remains of a cake on the ground. Chief Hong, seemingly surprised, responds to the protagonist with a worried expression, calling him leader in an ironic manner. At that moment, a purple-haired woman named Kim Yang, kneeling, watches the scene in shock at the brutality around her. She murmurs, asking how someone could be so cruel. In an unexpected gesture, she licks her finger, which is smeared with cream from the crushed cake on the ground, in an act that seems more symbolic than relevant to the current situation. Maru, surrounded by henchmen, glares at Kim Yang, who is still kneeling. With a desperate expression, she loudly asks, "Who did this?" Her question reflects the confusion and shock at the massacre that just took place. One of Hong's men, wounded on the ground, tries to speak before being brutally attacked, his neck pierced by a weapon, ending any chance of survival. The henchmen around react tensely and nervously, pointing at Kim Yang and Maru. Chief Hong also turns to the woman, and the tension in the room rises. Amidst this tension, the protagonist, his face still stained with blood, looks around in confusion, as if trying to understand the situation. He questions himself, me, in a moment of uncertainty about his own responsibility or involvement in the chaos unfolding. Suddenly, a gunshot is fired, and a shocked expression overtakes the protagonist as he hears the deafening sound of the bullet slicing through the air. Kim Yang watches everything closely as the situation escalates further into chaos, intensifying the conflict and growing violence in the room. Kim Yang, her face distraught, draws a gun and points it directly at Maru, calling him a bastard. In a swift move, he dodges the bullets, rolling on the ground and shielding himself from the crossfire. He quickly realizes that he's facing someone armed and acknowledges the urgency of the situation. He reflects that when confronting someone with a gun, he must close the distance as quickly as possible to have any chance of victory, even knowing it's extremely risky. As he tries to recover, Kim rushes toward him, surprising him by closing the distance herself. He questions her intentions, but realizes that she is now within striking range. He attempts to disarm her, reaching for the gun. However, a shot is fired, making the situation even more tense as the two engage in a direct struggle for control of the pistol. Maru is now determined to end the situation quickly, as she is vulnerable and within his reach. Maru, determined to end the fight with a single blow, moves forward to strike Kim. However, before he can fully react, she surprises him with a powerful kick that sends him flying into the air. The impact is so strong that it makes him spin, and his expression reveals intense pain. Even as he tries to recover, she continues with a flurry of rapid and violent attacks, hitting him multiple times while he barely manages to defend himself. Kim Yang demonstrates impressive fighting skills. Maru, shocked, questions how she can be so effective even in hand-to-hand combat. He tries to understand what's wrong, but is unable to stop the brutal sequence of blows. With a face full of hatred, she screams that the revenge for the cake will be paid with his life, intensifying the brutality of her assault. Each of her strikes seems more ruthless than the last, as she continues to punish him without hesitation. Maru finds himself in a dilemma, realizing that there are no openings in Kim's relentless attacks. Outside, the orange-haired man shouts for Maru to be careful, warning him that Kim Yang, the purple-haired woman, is an incredibly skilled fighter, trained by North Korea's regime. In the middle of the confrontation, both end up on the ground, with Maru trying to disarm her while struggling for control of the weapon. The scene opens up to a hall filled with blood-soaked bodies scattered across chairs and tables, a clear sign of the brutal massacre that took place there. In a bizarre twist, Kim ignores the carnage around her and sits down calmly to eat. As she chews pieces of meat and noodles, surrounded by corpses, she acts as if nothing had happened, a grotesque scene contrasting with the earlier violence. Chief Hong enters the room, walking among the bodies carrying a large axe on his back. He steps into the hall with a menacing expression, asking who killed the pig he had intended to butcher. He then removes his sunglasses, saying he wants to see the face of the one responsible. When he spots Kim Yang calmly eating among the bodies, he is confused. He is surprised to realize that the little girl he had underestimated is not a pig, but a person. He continues to watch her with a mix of surprise and fascination. Kim Yang, without interrupting her meal, looks at him and asks if he is a soldier from the South Korean army. Chief Hong smiles widely, confirming that she is indeed a person, but he adds with disdain that to him, she is nothing more than a beggar. He mocks her, saying she should take her time to eat slowly, placing a bottle of soda on the table, clearly enjoying the situation. Kim Yang drinks the soda offered by Hong, and he comments on how well she eats, despite the chaos around her. He teases her, saying she could make a lot of money doing mukbang broadcasts while she continues eating. Confused, Kim asks what a mukbang is, and Hong explains, showing her a video on his phone of a girl eating large amounts of food. He tells her that, just like in the video, she could make money simply by eating that way. Kim Yang is surprised to discover that it's possible to make money by eating a lot. Her eyes sparkle with the idea, but she quickly regains her composure and bursts out in anger, accusing Hong of trying to bribe her with food. She stands up, furious, and shouts that her revolutionary spirit will never be corrupted by American capitalist ideals. Chief Hong, carrying his axe, tries to convince Kim Yang to swear loyalty to him, offering unlimited meals for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and more. Kim Yang, impressed, accepts and pledges her allegiance, promising to serve him well. The chief responds that he will be her master from now on. However, Kim says that before fully accepting him as her master, she will clean up the mess around her and walks away carrying food. As she leaves, the man asks her to bring back some ice cream. A week later, Hong reads a newspaper about a mysterious explosion and questions Kim Yang if she was responsible. She appears, covered in blood and eating 2 ice creams, and denies knowing what he's talking about. Nevertheless, he mentions that one of the ice creams must be his. Kim Yang pretends to be confused, refusing to give up the ice cream. The scene then shifts back to the confrontation between Kim Yang and Maru, where they continue to fight fiercely, each trying to overpower the other. Maru continues to battle fiercely with Kim Yang, both exchanging brutal blows. In a critical moment, he manages to grab Kim Yang's gun, preventing her from firing. He then throws her to the ground with force, but she quickly counters with a powerful strike that sends him flying backward. As the fight unfolds, a phone rings on the ground nearby. The bloody hand of a man in a suit reaches out to pick up the phone, and he answers the call. On the other end, his daughter's voice encourages him, saying they are rooting for him. The man smiles and responds, saying he's busy at the moment but tries to reassure his daughter, telling her she should eat without him. The conversation continues with the daughter mentioning that she and her mother already ate eel, which surprises the man. He becomes confused by the information and asks what she means, as the mention of eel seems to hold a greater significance. He grows concerned about his wife's intentions, while the fight between Kim and Maru rages on. Hong, armed with an axe, watches the situation as another man, the protagonist, fights. He is warned about Kim Yang and her incredible fighting talents. Kim Yang begins to attack the protagonist with several strikes as he tries to defend himself. The fight intensifies, and the blonde man observes from afar, intrigued by the difference in skill between the two. His subordinates express their loyalty and dedication, even begging to work overtime to impress the boss, but the chief seems more focused on the fight. Kim Yang's attacks are brutal and fast, demonstrating her combat skills. She lands several blows on the protagonist as he tries to fight back, but it becomes clear that she has the upper hand. The chief comments that Kim Yang fights as well as she eats, reinforcing his confidence in her abilities. The battle between Maru and Kim Yang continues to rage intensely. Kim Yang is demonstrating extreme combat skills, and her team of subordinates is cheering her on, showing loyalty and support. They exalt her strength and believe she is the best. In contrast, there's a twist when one of the superiors mentions that, despite Kim Yang being trained to perfection, there's something more special about Maru, sparking curiosity. In a flashback sequence, we see Maru in training, learning dismemberment and combat techniques under the guidance of a muscular red-haired man who seems to be Maru's mentor. This mentor demonstrates advanced skills and emphasizes that only someone with years of experience can perform certain moves with the mastery he displays. Kim Yang, on the other hand, is depicted walking through corpses with an impassive demeanor, reinforcing her impeccable training and coldness in battle, while Maru appears to have followed a slightly more humane path. Maru is practicing his blade skills and asks if he's doing it right, while slicing through several pieces of hanging meat. The director watches in surprise, realizing that Maru has learned in just 1 month what normally takes years of practice. Even so, Maru comments that it's hard and asks the director if he has any muscle pain relief. Hong, impressed, decides to test him with something more challenging. He brings forth a ferocious creature, chained and full of rage, saying he's been seeing a lot of these lately. He then challenges Maru to butcher the creature. Maru, with his knife in hand, watches the animal approach with heavy steps, suggesting that the next test will be even more brutal and intense than the last. A giant bull appears, and the director taunts Maru, telling him to try to slaughter the animal. Maru, with determination, prepares for the battle. The director is impressed, thinking that a task like this would normally take even the most experienced employees an hour. Maru defeats the bull in less than 5 minutes. The director, now smiling sinisterly, realizes that he has found the perfect butcher, someone he's been searching for all this time. Back in the present, Kim Yang and Maru are locked in an intense confrontation. Kim Yang draws her knife and charges at Maru, who tries to defend himself, but the fight is brutal and fast. As Kim Yang declares, having nothing means you can be filled with anything. Maru is quickly learning and mimicking Kim Yang's moves, which surprises her. She wonders if he is copying her actions and seems impressed by how quickly Maru is improving in combat. Even with the difference in skill between them, Maru shows that he's constantly improving throughout the fight, which worries Kim Yang. The combat between the two continues with a series of quick and powerful strikes, demonstrating that Maru is a formidable opponent, even against someone of Kim Yang's caliber. The battle is far from over, and Kim Yang realizes that Maru is becoming more and more dangerous as the fight progresses. Both continue fighting, determined to win. Chief Hong, watching from a distance with his axe on his back, intervenes, rhetorically asking if the others are curious to see the outcome of this battle. Hong says he won't let the others see what's about to happen. Two men in the background beg, saying that he's really going to stop there and ask him to let them watch until the end, even offering cookies. However, the chief ignores them and prepares to attack. He leaps with his weapon, while others watch in shock. He then promises to show something even more interesting. Maru and the others, including a purple-haired girl, seem surprised and apprehensive about the situation. Hong, clearly ready for the fight, pulls out his weapon and tells Maru to come at him with a sinister smile on his face, displaying his confidence.